corruption, deceit, loyalty, betrayal, family, revenge, capitalism, the life of Italians growing up in America. These are the many themes of The Godfather. In 1969, an Italian writer growing up in New York by the name of Mario Puzo wrote a story about a notorious crime family named the Corleones. 3 years later, it would become the most popular crime film of all time. It would become probably the most influential crime film of all time. The Godfather was an entirely different crime film altogether. No longer were we dealing with the prohibition crime films of the 30s and 40s. And no longer were we dealing with Italians being unrealistically portrayed. Talking like abyss, that kind of mentality. We were not dealing with that anymore. And then in 1967, a little film came out called Bonnie and Clyde. Changed the face of how films were made and how crime films were presented. Now, fast forward to 1972, where Francis Ford Coppola, after making a name for himself and creating American Zoetrope with George Lucas, he and Mario Puzo, the writer of the original novel, would come together to try and adapt the novel to the screen. And it was a battle all its own. The Godfather is many things to many people. Some say it's a metaphor for capitalism. Others say that it's an honest look at Italian Americans. Some say that it's about family, or at the very least the concept of having a large group of people around you. For me, personally, The Godfather is something entirely different. For me, I see it as sort of a historic record. I remember when I was 17 and I got The Godfather Coppola restoration for Christmas. I remember watching all 3 films and trying to understand what it all meant. And now that The Godfather is coming up on its 50th anniversary, I guess it's fair to say that we finally can talk about this series in more thorough detail. My friends and I, over the past 3 weeks, have been watching these movies. Of course, one of my friends had never seen these movies before. And this Friday, February 25th, which happens to be my birthday, AMC is re-releasing The First Godfather in theaters in celebration of its 50th anniversary. I figured the time is right to talk about all 3 of these films. And sure enough, it's logical to assume that we, as a society, wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for The Godfather. If we were not influenced by The Godfather in some form. The younger generation has been introduced to Godfather in many different ways. Either it's been mocked or referenced. For me personally, The Godfather is a historic record. It's a historic record of time and place. An epic crime film about a notorious family that thought they were doing things for the right reasons. But, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Godfather, in many ways, is sort of a reminder of how far we've come when it comes to crime films. You have to understand that in the 1960s, by the time The Godfather was published, crime films were fading away. It didn't matter who they cast, it didn't matter what they did. People suddenly lost interest in crime films. As a result of this, The Godfather became something more than that. In celebration of its 50th anniversary, my friends and I, over the past 3 weeks, have been watching these films. I've been writing the scripts for them, and I started reading the original novel. And I feel like the time is right to talk about these films. It's funny that we're talking about The Godfather now, but there was a time when the movie almost never even got made. The studio kept interfering over and over. They had no faith in this movie at all. Francis Ford Coppola fought with them on a daily basis. The studio did not like the casting. Francis Ford Coppola fought with them every step of the way. And then finally, once it got finished, even that proved problematic. But just like with the original Star Wars, it became a cultural phenomenon that even he could not foresee. I feel like it's right to say that The Godfather has transcended culture in more ways than one. Without The Godfather, a lot of the people who would come after him, like Martin Scorsese, you would not have had a lot of what you have now if The Godfather did not play a big part in it. I could go on, but I wanted to give you a little preview of what I've been working on. After I get done with my video on Alien Resurrection and finish the entire Alien series, finally, we're going to talk about this trilogy. To review these movies in depth would be cliche in and of itself. So rather than doing the same thing that anybody else would do, which is to talk about the plot and the characters and all that, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to analyze them from a filmmaking point of view. Rather than talk about, oh, here's the plot, here's his character, and so forth, I'm going to talk about why they're historic. Why they have great shot compositions, why they have great acting, why they have good stories, and most important of all, interesting and intricate themes. You have to understand that these crime films were different than the crime films that had come before. The banter of Edward G. Robinson and the slick, tough guy, James Cagney, all of that it had its time. It was time for something different in the crime film world. 50 years after the original movie came out. A movie that was once told that it would never amount to anything. Would become probably the single greatest film of all time. Or at least that's what it says according to AFI. So, I hope you'll join me and discuss these films and to celebrate its 50th anniversary. I'll see you there.